It's a new.
Hello to those
Thank you.
online. We're
Thank you.
doing a quick sound check to make sure our audio is going through. Can you give us a thumbs up if you can hear us?
Seconded by a person.
Maybe. All right, I'll try again. Can you hear us? Those online? We're just doing a sound check. Yay, okay. Fantastic. Okay, I'm gonna use this. Good evening, directors, staff, and members of the public joining us, and those watching online. I will now call this August 31st, 2023 meeting of the Twin Cities German Immersion School Board to order. Let's begin with our mission, vision, and values. The mission of the Twin Cities German Immersion School is the innovative education of the whole child through German immersion. Our vision is andere hören, andere sehen, dort offen denken und handeln. Translated to educating multilingual world citizens who hear others, see others, and think and act with an open mind. And our values are curiosity, kindness, challenge and support, intercultural engagement, and community. We acknowledge and appreciate that TCGIS is located on Wapekute, Dakota traditional, ancestral, and contemporary homeland near Lake Minnewaca in the land now known as Minnesota Makoche. Our presence here is linked to generations of Wapekute stewardship over their land, as well as to the historical and ongoing injustices of settler colonization that impact Indigenous people to the present day. We are committed to understanding our role in this legacy and to educating ourselves and our community about Indigenous history through continued mindfulness and engagement in and outside the classroom. Ms. Henriksen, will you please call the roll for the record?
Director Albers,
Here.
Director Alcatuch,
Here.
Director Eberhardt,
Here.
Director Hartmann,
Here.
Director Height is not here, Director Huizenga,
Here.
Director Klondats, here, Director Reich,
Here.
Director Smaka,
Here.
Director Tesfa Jesus is not here, Director Yamanab,
Here.
sorry, and ex-official member interim executive director Karen Klinsing. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a quorum. I'd also like to acknowledge our principal who is attending this evening and is going to give us a principal's report. So tonight we have the great honor of State Representative Athena Hollins, who is the representative for TCGIS District 66B, attending tonight, and she is going to conduct the oath of office for all of the school board members to help us remember our duty and our duty as public servants. So thank you so much for coming. Great honor to have you.
Thank you so much for having me here. This is truly my honor. I was really excited to be able to be here and do this. One thing I've been thinking about as we kind of talked about public service is how literally almost everything that we do is decided by the people who show up and who come every day to make those decisions and to guide the pathway forward. But what a lot of folks don't know is that it's a truly, I don't want to say thankless, but it's kind of a thankless job. There's not a lot of glory in it. There's not a lot of accolades, you know, as if people tell me all the time, you know, well, you get paid lots of money. And I'm like, oh no, I don't. But we do public service because we know that our communities deserve people who care, and they deserve community members who understand what is going on within the community. And that's why you all are here, because you are dedicated public servants. And this is the exact same thing, right? You are elected to this position and you are representing our community and arguably our most precious assets, which are our children. And so I'm truly, truly honored to be here today. And I'm happy to, I think I understand how this is gonna go. I think, is it time?
So, yes, I think all the board members can stand up.
So,
And raise your right hand. Oh, perfect. Wandy, here's a seat for you,
Thank you.
but you have to stand now. Perfect timing.
It's like a concept.
so we're gonna raise our right hand. And somebody has broken this out into nice little snippets for me, so I'm going to say it and then you can repeat after me. I solemnly swear or affirm that I will support
I solemnly swear or affirm that I will support
the constitutions of the United States and the state of Minnesota,
the constitutions of the United States and the state of Minnesota,
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office
of the Board of Directors of Twin Cities German Immersion School
from the Board of Directors of Twin Cities German Immersion School.
I understand that having taken the foregoing oath,
I understand that having taken the foregoing oath,
I hereby signify my acceptance of the office and its legal and moral obligations.
I hereby signify my acceptance of the office and its legal and moral obligations.
Congratulations, you've all done that.
Thank you so much, Ina. And just as a token, a small token of our appreciation,
Oh my gosh.
we have a Twin Cities German Immersion School shirt. We have a TCIGS mug, and you can write your name on it. It says, "Hallo, mein Name ist."
I love it.
Okay, and then these are my favorite German chocolate.
I was just there, I was in Germany and I bought so much chocolate. Oh my gosh, thank you. This is so sweet. Thank you so much. Oh my gosh, thank you all for having me. Do you want me to stick around for business or?
No, I know you're a busy woman. We should go and enjoy your evening.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And really,
Actually,
truly,
did you
thank
wanna
you.
do a
But we
photo?
need to do a photo. Thank you. Brief recess for a photo. Thank you for reminding me.
All my kids are gonna be so excited. And I won't wear the German immersion shirt.
Okay, are we back, Julia? Yep. Fantastic. The first item on the agenda is the consent agenda. The consent agenda contains routine items that do not involve major policies, budget, or decisions that require discussion. Directors may pull consent agenda items for separate discussion if needed. Vice Chair Reich, will you please move approval of the consent agenda?
I would move that we approve the consent agenda.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Discussion. Or approving the minutes.
Sorry, what?
Last month's minutes are part of the consent agenda.
It is,
Can
yeah.
I make a recommendation? For a
Absolutely.
change? Just a correction to the request or the motion to approve the policies we approved in June. That was made by Director Albers, not me.
Okay.
And I checked with her and that's her recollection.
Okay. Change is noted. Thank you. Any other corrections to the minute? Fantastic. All right, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, say nay. Motion carries. All right, next item is the open forum. But nobody is in attendance tonight, so we will skip that. That brings us to the principal's report.
That's it.
We need to, I have several tabs open here.
Special.
Special recognition.
Yes. Now I have my agenda here. All right, so a special recognition. The school board likes to recognize volunteers and staff who have gone above and beyond supporting the school. And then we'd like to first start with recognizing the community garden volunteers. The community garden is a plot in the D10 district community garden. And all these families here listed have taken turns throughout the summer to either plant the garden or tend the garden, water the garden, pull the weeds, and pick the produce, and then the produce is donated to the Keystone Community Food Shelf. So this is a great outreach opportunity. We have our sign there and we are able to connect with other neighbors who are there tending their gardens as well. So it's been a lot of fun and we've been providing a nice service to the community. So thank you to all of these families listed. I want to extend a special thank you to Tara Erickson. Tara took over the organizing of the garden this year. So she has been communicating and organizing the volunteers and keeping everyone up to date on what needs to be done. And it's a lot of work, and I thank you, Tara, for taking that on.
TCIGS had many successful summer camps this summer. We had camps for track and field. We had camps with a lot of cardboard. We had some sport camps. And this is the long list of community members who provided their talents. And the one name that I want to point out, especially Sam Groff, who was our head of summer camp, was really the organizing head of the whole production and just did a great job. So thanks to those summer camp leaders. Summer school, which was slightly different. We had, I think, between 8 and 10 kindergartners on any given day who were building some skills for a more successful first grade. Was run by some really successful teachers, Stephanie Pisto and Emily Richardson and Elizabeth Kinsey Hawley had the kindergartners, and then Zach Corwell and Jenna Powell were running our extended school year. That was the end of June up until about the middle of July. Thanks to them. Our school calendar is beautiful this year, and I just wanted to extend a special thanks to Liz Kestner, who is a graphic designer by trade and spent her free time making our calendar as beautiful as it is with help from Nicole Crashell. Speaking of Nicole Crashell, just straight crushed it this summer. She was working really hard on a storage room for our student records, finding a new space, getting new shelving, and then at some point in the band room, there were no less than 80,000 boxes And you can find her at any given time shuffling through all these things, and it's all cleaned up, put away, stuff's getting shredded, and we have a beautiful new storage room that is up to statute. So thanks to Nicole. I didn't hyperbole on the number of boxes. But very good.
Excellent.
and after pictures.
They say a lot.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you. And that brings us to the principal's report. Principal Elizabeth Sanfenig, you have the floor.
Thank you, Director Albert. Can we show, are we gonna show something? Yes. Okay, great. We'll start with some staffing. We did talk at the last meeting that we were at in June about a lot of the new hires, and a lot of those hires go in, a lot of our hires go into summer as well. And some of them were made last week. So here we are officially 100% staffed at TCGIS, which I want to stop to pause for. That is not the case at schools across the cities. That is not the case. We are 100% staffed with every position that we have posted and need and require. Holy cow.
Just to add to that, the Minneapolis Public School Board met on August 23rd, and at that meeting, they still had 404 licensed open positions.
We have
Yeah,
been
it's a big deal.
brainstorming every, I guess once a day, maybe twice a day for 15 minutes about who can we call, how can we reach out, what's something different we can do. That's what we've been doing since end of June. And it finally paid off. So the last teacher was in place on Monday. So it's been intense, but
It's been
worth it.
intense. Yeah. The good news is that TCGIS was an easy sell to a lot of these folks on this spreadsheet. So the last hire that we made is the first one on here. We found our kindergarten teacher, Andrew Claremont, might be a familiar name. He's returning to our district. We have hired him now for the third time, I heard. He was a permanent sub in his first position. And he's a tier 4 licensed elementary teacher, native speaker, went to the JFK school, is an amazing soul, and had a great first week in kindergarten. Our kindergarten languages specialist will be known as Frau Vanessa, and she is starting with us September 18th. She is in an unlicensed position, but is a trained Kita teacher. So she's an Erzieherin, has that 2-year degree that Germans get. And she's also a native German, and she's going to be assisting in the 3 kindergartens. We had a 2nd grade teacher, Robin I think it might be Sander. Now that I look at this, I think it's just Sander. Who is a tier 2 license, who's a licensed elementary teacher from Germany, native Germany, is bringing his family. And then a psych intern who is also going to serve in some social, emotional, behavioral interventionist roles. Her name is Ariana, and she's going to be a doctoral intern with Dr. Mecklenburg, working on her dissertation while she does her clinic hours here. A BCBA stands for Board Certified Behavioral Analyst, using some of our SPED funds to bring in a woman named Dominique Schnell, who is a contracted trainer for behavior, just to give our staff some training on how to manage some of the different behaviors we see post-pandemic. She is contracted to work with SPED, but because she's student-wide support, we can all learn a thing or two from her. And then the next slide is a couple of 3 EAs. We've got Corinne in 1st grade, and then Reb is also in 1st grade, and Noah, he's a little bit of a floater. Noah is a German speaker, Corinne is German proficient, and Reb does not, I don't believe, speaks German. Just wanted to include some stipended positions because those are teachers who have taken on things above and beyond their regular position. This year, moving into the QComp coordinator position is Claudia Mueller. We have 2 ES coordinators that I'm really excited to bring on. We haven't had ES coordinators in the last year, and Nina Maslovsky, a veteran teacher here at TCGIS, and Leonie Manis, who's in her 3rd year, are going to be the ES coordinators. They've got some great ideas, super excited to work with them. Returning MS coordinator and our DAF coordinator, remember that stands for German as a foreign language, is Katrin Gilhoff. She's also our ZFA teacher, so she has all the abbreviations. MS Tech coordinator again is Sam Graf. Athletic director returning Chris Tabish, and PD coordinator is Claudia Mueller. So just really grateful to those teachers for doing more than is asked. Some academic updates, some low hanging fruit and some much higher hanging fruit. One thing we're doing, trying to instill the idea of this K-8 school, that we are one school, is sending the Monday email to all staff. Just gives updates, gives shout outs, gives birthdays, pertinent information, just trying to house all information in one thing and sending them to all staff. K-8 task force update, we have 9 PD days scheduled for the year, and we've broken those down into different sections, trying to make sure that our teachers get their certification and their CEUs, but also trying to move some strategic work forward and trying to push work on student achievement. We've broken our teaching staff into 3 task forces, each task force tasked with a certain part of the mission, and they are known by that part of the mission. So we have one task force working on innovative education, focusing on things like teaching strategies, but also standards alignment. Whole Child is working on aligning SEL standards, working in the CASEL standards, working on anything having to do with that whole child world that's not education specifically standard based. And then the German Immersion Task Force, which is a task force we had, now we're just bringing it into PD days. And we had the first meeting last week. We set some focuses. We're meeting again tomorrow to hone our focuses into SMART goals and to work on some benchmarks and timelines and to start to actually crank some things out. Task forces end. So we have some goals in sight. ES and MS and all teacher meetings are being brought into the PD days. That was something that we saw in the org health and in teacher exit surveys and things like that, was to bring the meeting time into work days. PBS is now headed by Catherine Radke and has seen some increased membership. So we were wanting more teachers at that table, and we have some. One of them just stepped in the door. Minnesota legislative updates. We talked a little bit in June about how this was one of the largest sessions we've had, and so we've had a lot of work cut out for us. And a big portion of the legislative update was the PBIS focus and restorative practices focus towards student behavior and discipline. For example, the state has told us that K-3 suspensions are no longer allowed. So just be really specific about certain things that are allowed and are not, but also really generic or general in we believe that behavior practices need to start to go into this direction. And the good news is that TCIGS was already there on a lot of those. We haven't had to pivot a whole lot. We already were deep into PBIS. It just sort of affirmed some of our values in our discipline policy and some of our values at our school.
But probably the most difficult one is that dismissals aren't allowed. So even dismissal from the classroom into another room for an extended period of time is no longer allowed. So we can't do an in-school detention or suspension. We have to figure out ways to address the behavior differently, which is it's pretty big shift philosophically for teachers. There's guidance out there on how long the kid can be out of the classroom for this kind of behavior redirection. So we're trying to give teachers all of the resources that they possibly need in order to respond to that very huge shift in what's allowed. And we have to report this to the state. And we've already started that reporting as of a few years ago. But now the reporting is going to have a little more import. So we're trying to give teachers all the support they need, because it's a huge shift. Right?
Yep, I lost my train of thought.
Sorry.
Yeah, for sure.
I just wanted to clarify that it's more than a suspension. It's a pretty big legislative initiative that was passed.
Yeah, for part of the reason we brought in people like Dominique Schnell for the BCBA, we sent a couple of people to VHT training, behavioral. Zach Corwell went to that training, just learning techniques so that we can build teacher skills. Those classroom teachers need to have alternatives. Then we can still use things like the buddy room. It just has to be for less time, and it has to be, as a last case. We have to go through a whole bunch of things before it can come to that. And so it just, it'll take a little time to sort out all the things. Right now, teachers are still being supported with like a behavior call. If there's something that's going on in classrooms, we're still able to go and assist the teacher. But one thing we're trying to do is keep the relationship between the student and the teacher instead of throwing that relationship on to the person who is doing the walkie call, me, for example. Making sure that if that teacher needs to connect with the student, that I am then stepping into that classroom, teaching a 10-minute first grade lesson so that the teacher can maybe go and play a quick game or do some kind of reconnection with the student so that that relationship becomes stronger or repaired and seen as the important relationship. Let's see. I think we can go to the next slide. I don't like that slide. The e-learning plan is something that the board needs to put approval on today. E-learning stands for the electric learning. It must be, that must be what the E is. Yeah, electronic learning. And it's not to be confused with anything that happened during the pandemic. It is not synchronous, it is asynchronous. If you remember that term, those are terms that sometimes trigger some of us educators. Asynchronous is no live interaction. Learning activities students can engage in at home are being handed out. We're handed out on day one, and those are enabling the schools to count towards count the day towards state mandated instructional hour totals. Basically, the state came down with a new legislature that made it much easier for TCIGS to participate in e-learning days, taking out the synchronous element. We did do a survey, and there are a few families that need assistance when it comes to internet access, and so we're hooking those families up with what they need. We will keep the 7th and 8th graders online for those days because they are the ones that have the tech that they bring home daily. And so they will interact on Google Classroom, which is the interface that we use with 7th and 8th graders and 5th and 6th graders in school. The school will communicate when it is planning to have an e-learning day. Schools are allowed to call up to 5 e-learning days each school year, and then we'll have to dip into snow days or heat days. If you go to the next slide, thank you. Parents will have a choice board for K-6, which is already sent home. That was part of the legislature that it needed to be home on day one. If you've seen the weather report for next week, you might understand why the beginning of the year is important. And then they will be available online for anybody that is losing them sometime between now and January and needs to print them. And they are designed so that I can use the same one for all 5 days because there's twice on them. I can mix up my options for assignments and still have a different experience all 5 days. But they're also designed to be low material read. So for example, a lot of them say read for 30 minutes. The FIAD teachers have added something on them. They all have some kind of easy movement that doesn't require parents who are home working or caring with for younger children to print anything or grab anything. It should be pretty self-contained. 7th and 8th grade will use Google Classroom, and those lessons will be posted by 10 o'clock, giving our teachers from 8 to 10 to be able to prepare something meaningful. And there is an e-learning website for all of this information that is linked on our TCGIS under Family Resources. One part of the legislature that stumped us for a little bit was that students students and parents need to be able to reach out to teachers that day. They need to be able to ask a question and get an answer. And email is a great way to do that. But the state really was thinking about equity when they made the statute and wanted to make sure that everybody was really going to be able to reach somebody. The whole idea of a choice board is that you don't need to have internet access or 3 Chromebooks at home for your 3 kids, that you can do what you need to do with just very easy materials. And so we are required to make sure that families are able to reach teachers via phone. And so we've come up with a system parents will call in the main line, and then we've got numbers kind of routing into different zones to get a hold of teachers. So we've got that in place, and again, all that information is on our website. I would pause now.
Yeah, we will require a board approval of our plan for the year. So that we can institute this. And that is one of the requirements of the legislate. To yeah, of the law. So sometime, I think tonight, if we can, you can ask questions and we could get that approved, that would be great.
So you
Okay,
have 5 mandatory days. You said
You can take up to 5 days.
up to 5, those
Yeah.
are not 5 mandatory days.
Not
No,
So that would have conflicted with a
right,
request for approval. If they met. if they
Correct.
met, You know?
yeah.
right,
Mhm.
And we want you to know that the union did look at this and they have approved it and they're fine
also
with
part
it.
of the statute.
That's also part of the statute. There was a question that came in the teacher development week about whether we should write into the policy that we should use all of these days first before we use up snow days or other days that might be built into the schedule. And I made an appeal for flexibility because there might be a day that happens, say, March, when we get those big snowstorms, right before spring break, where maybe we've only used 3 days. We have a big snowstorm on Friday before spring break. We might rather just use a snow day than actually a learning day. Because then we don't have to worry about doing homework on that day and people can just relax, go home and start their break. So we'd like to, I just think that latitude is helpful and the teachers seem to be fine with that. So, I don't think we ever want to use an e-learning or add a day to the school calendar in lieu of e-learning. I wasn't arguing for that, but just I know we have a couple snow days as well. And once in a while, we might want to use those out of succession with using all the learning days first.
I'll make a motion to approve the e-learning plan.
Oh, just a question. So
We'll
this has to
do
be,
discussion after the motion.
oh, sorry. Yep.
That's okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Director Albers. The motion is to approve the e-learning plan as presented. Discussion.
So this is not about the specific plan or what you were just talking about, but the process is it has to be approved by MDE. Is that right? Or just submitted to MDE?
Has to be approved by our board and submitted to MD.
So we just submit it to MDE. So there's not a chance they would find it deficient in any way and send it back. It's done once.
Yeah, as long as we met all the conditions of
Okay.
the statute, yeah.
And you guys are comfortable we have.
Mhm.
Just for my clarification, when it's a snow day, does that add a day to the end of the school year? versus
Not
the-
always, no.
Okay, so you have an option.
2 or 3 built in still.
We have 2 or 3 days that don't require us to use the e-learning plan that we could just use
Just-
as
just
an
a day
open
off,
day,
yeah.
as a day off, yeah.
We all learned a lot from last year when we got twice as much snow as we do.
So I'm assuming that when parents call the main line and it's routed to a teacher, it's anonymized somehow. Yeah.
Yep, using a Google number.
It's really nice having a
That's cool.
technology whiz who works for TCIGS,
Mhm.
Jesse,
Thank you, Jesse.
yeah.
This is a bit of a silly question. Was there a difference between like a snow day and a heat day? Are they all just clumped within
They're the same.
the
Yep.
thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, so we can use the e-learning days for heat as well.
We could use our snow days for heat too. We call them something else. I mean, we call them snow days, but we could use them for heat.
Inclement weather.
Inclement weather days.
Just
Mhm.
Mhm.
Is the intention to use all 5 e-learning days or in a year or?
I mean, we're only gonna use them if we need them. So if we get a lot of snow or a lot of heat, Or if 2015 repeats itself and we get a lot of -55-degree days in a row. Those are the situations we will use these days. But it could be that we would never use a single one, or we only use one. If we have a mild winter.
We know that calling an e-learning day has implications for families. We will not necessarily react to the weather any differently. Knowing that we have these, we will still be cautious. It just makes us not have to add to the end of the year.
Is there any kind of academic accountability that comes along with the assignments that are given, because it is
Yeah,
asynchronous?
so part of the former legislature and when we were doing synchronous learning in another time was that there had to be, it was a great term, it was some kind of interaction. It was meaningful interaction, that's what it was, between the teacher. And this is acknowledging that the student is returning. The student is returning to school, and so the meaningful interaction happens the next day or in 2 days. And that's when they will either, present a teacher with something, or they'll be held accountable for what they have done. But also, the state has given us a lot of freedom in this. So the accountability is per teacher.
Great questions. Anything else?
How did we define the criteria for when an e-learning day will be called? So we have the 6 to 8 inches of snow within 24 hours. Do we want more flexibility in that, or how did you land on 6 to 8 inches? And then the next one is more.
Minneapolis had some pretty specific. They had some pretty specific markers, heat index of 105, for example. There's also some question about which part of the day you're taking that heat index at. We have air conditioning versus central, St. Paul does it, so they're looking at things differently. They're also making decisions for an entire district, and ours are a little easier to make.
Well, half our school doesn't have AC.
Half of our school doesn't, but we do have the ability, if the heat index is only happening in the afternoon, to move kids around the building and to get relief.
How about the
Did that answer your
snow?
question? How about the snow? That was needing to have an indicator, needing to have an amount.
Are these consistent with the standards that we've used for making these decisions in the past?
All right, thank you. Any further questions?
I remember last year there was a call for 4 to 5 inches of snow, and I said, nope. Make it before. Shall I move on?
Well, we need to vote,
Oh,
but I just wanted to thank you for getting this implemented. I know there was a lot of pre-work that needed to be done just to qualify for this, I think.
yep, Esther Noy did a lot of the groundwork, and then the teachers have made some of the logistics happen, and so this was a real team effort.
Mhm.
We spent some time on PD day, having the teachers put these menu boards together.
Mhm. So this will make a big difference for our school, and it'll be great to avoid the drama of adding days, so. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right, if there's no further discussion, all those in favor of approving the e-learning day plan, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Motion carries and the e-learning plan is approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just to follow up on that, we're required to notify parents at the beginning of the school year. Will something go out?
We already did.
Already did.
Yeah, it went out in a constant
Oh, good.
contact with all this information and a link to that site.
We thought about calling a special board meeting ahead of sending that out to get this passed, and we just decided that was not the most efficient way to do it. So we just decided to move forward. We could always amend it later and send it out again. So that's why we kind of seems like the
Mhm.
cart before the horse, but school started before the board meeting happened,
Mhm.
so.
I appreciate that decision.
Well, and Julie was out of town, so we had a short window between which we could have that meeting and call it for this one thing, so.
Mhm.
We figured we'd just amend it if we had to and resend. But we were also confident we crossed a lot of Ts and dotted a lot of Is.
Capstone's coming.
Yay.
Students arrive from their partner schools on 9/14. I think we've got 38 students arriving. They leave almost 3 weeks later. They'll be integrated into all grades again this year, K-8. They'll be hosted by the Capstone Committee, 8th grade teachers, and we're so excited that parent Danny Nicholson is taking over for the role that John Dahl had last year of hostess with the mostest. So she's gonna take them to places, and she's arranged everything, and she's really freed up time for the admin to do the other back to school responsibilities that we have. We had the first meeting of the year just on back to school night for 2024. And the first meeting for the class of 2025 is coming up in October when we'll do middle school curriculum night. Couple of curriculum updates. I learned a lot about what Fibelfreiheit is from Anke Krug. A Fibel is the little reader that goes along with curriculum, and Fibelfreiheit is the idea that a teacher gets to choose that. And so I learned something cultural, that our teachers are coming with that expectation. And if they're the ones that are using the materials and the standards are all kind of the same, that there gets to be some choice. So we had a small group of teachers that are vetting this new choice, Deutsch mit Olli. It's really recommended by one of our interventionists, Eva Schneider-Baumeister. And so the first grade team is really excited to use their new materials. There's a lot of ability to keep track of individual progress. And there's new materials to diagnose reading difficulties and give specific protocols for how to work with students with those special needs. So vocab lesson for the day, Fibelfreiheit. Academic standards and curriculum reviews schedule, just to remind you that we are on track to be fully implemented with science standards. Teachers are starting to implement them already. We need to be fully implemented by the next school year. English language arts curriculum is set for review this year, so we'll take a look at those standards and take a look at the materials that we have. And this will come up again in our curriculum advisory committee. So just a little preview. Some student support updates. We have a new intensive DAF program for the first few weeks. We've got a couple of kiddos who are new to the school and don't have, are not coming with German skills. And so Katrin Gilhoff worked really hard to come up with a new program for the first, I think it's 3 to 4 weeks of school, to give them a little bit bigger boost in the beginning of the year. It's a pilot program, so it's just with 3 students this year. If it shows success, we'd like to be able to expand it more. It really helps us with the problem of kids coming to our school because our school is great, but also having to catch up. And so, and something like this could be a great way out of that problem. Another student support occupational therapist, Natalie Voxlin, is increasing to 5 days, and she's going to be providing some school-wide support, working with teachers on having calming corners, working with teachers on sensory needs for all students, and just, again, giving tools and filling that teacher toolbox. The BCBA is new again, board certified behavioral analyst. She's meeting with teachers. If a teacher has a specific student that they're really struggling with, Dominique is able to go into that teacher's room, do an observation, have a conference with that teacher and say, here's what I saw, you did this really great. Have you ever thought about doing this? Or here's this tool, or here's this strategy, and help the teacher implement those behavioral strategies. And the same thing with Kelly Sawyer, who was here last year as a behavioral interventionist. She is on board again this year. She's already been in classes working on sticker charts and things like that already on day 2 and day 3. Teacher supports. We had a really great new teacher workshop week. Kelly Sawyer did a session for new teachers called Go Slow to Go Fast. We had intercultural engagement with Ralph Shearig again, PBIS training. Oh, I missed one. Deanna Irwin came in to do SEL, and she always has a great take on an international perspective, introducing SEL, social emotional learning, which is sometimes new to our international teachers. And so we sent, she's our secret weapon. Responsive classroom again, and then the new teacher mentor manual is a new product. We've had a teacher mentoring system where we pair a new teacher with a veteran teacher. This year, there is a month-by-month manual that takes the new teacher and the resource teacher through a series of checklists. Have you talked about this, and this? And it's got some special things for middle school because they sometimes have some things that are not pertaining to elementary. There was a great all staff worksheet, super positive vibe. It was a great week for me. I heard a lot of positive comments from teachers that were just really excited about the 23-24 school year. We featured some PD, some proactive, coming up on Friday's proactive PD. We've got a student support session planned, and the tiered teacher support system is something that's also new this year, something that I'm going to credit Karen with. She kind of came up with the idea of what we would do for indicators, how we would know that teachers might be needing more support. And then we've got 4 tiers of support that we will run through when we see a teacher who is needing extra support. It's not super public facing yet. It's kind of a document that we're working off of. We'll try to figure out a way to explain some of that as we go forward in the year. It's just really good to know that there is a plan in place if we see teachers begin to struggle.
Strategically, just don't want to repeat of any teachers leaving in the middle of the school year. So it's our proactive approach to trying to find teachers who need support early and help
I
them.
got over. You're good.
We're good.
That was 30 minutes, but
That was my last.
we're ahead of
It was a
schedule.
big week for
Yeah.
the principal. There was a lot that happened, and the teachers too. I mean, there was a lot going on that first week with PD and the second week with students. So 30 minutes is a tall order. Yeah, hard to get it all in.
Okay, well.
Good job.
But you did
Perfect
it.
this timing. That was my last thing.
Thank you so much.
Are there any questions?
I have a question about the 38 students coming.
Yeah,
I think that's fewer than the student number that will travel there, right?
we don't have as many students traveling this year so far. So the student number, they do not align, and maybe 38 isn't the correct number, but I'm pretty sure it's close. We don't necessarily have all of our students signed up yet, but it's not too far from it.
Okay.
Yeah, we are always hoping that the numbers align.
Mhm.
They don't always. We had less interest from the Germans this year.
Is there a plan to evaluate the partner schools this year?
There is.
Okay.
Yeah. They're great schools. We really enjoy the teachers, but one of them is only sending 4 kids. And that's just not gonna cut it for us. So we need a plan.
Mhm.
Katerina and I have some ideas.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you. Any other questions for the principal? All right, thank you for your report. Next on the agenda is the executive director's report. Karen Kunzing, you have the floor.
Hi. So, start off with my part-time remote has been full-time in person for the last 2 weeks. Kind of planned that though, because it's very important couple of weeks. We're setting the stage, setting the tone, setting the direction. And it felt very good. We don't have too many peanut gallery criticisms yet, so hopefully we're on the right track. So we'll talk a little bit about what we are doing. You can go to the next slide. So enrollment isn't exactly where we wanted. It's at 589. Budgeted for 611. So we're going to be talking in the next month or so about how to create a working budget for the more accurate enrollment. In terms of strategies, it was a little hard to do too much outreach this summer, because our communications person left in the middle of the summer. And really that's who organizes events and outreach activities and things like that. So we did some things that were a little more internal in terms of processes, and worked on every time somebody called and said they weren't returning, we called back and called back and called back, and did some real persistent calls. And some of them Elizabeth took, some of them Nicole did. And I think those were generally effective at keeping a number of the folks who had called and were concerned. With our goal was to try to help families who might be thinking about last year, whether they want to redo that for this year, and help them understand that maybe their experience last year was just last year, and that moving forward it could be different, and here's how. And I think that Nicole and Elizabeth did a great job with explaining how things were going to look brighter this year. And then we're continuing to kind of connect with those families, and as many families as we can, trying to be very open to having them come in and talk to us. We've all answered parent phone calls, emails, and had visits. So that's kind of been part of the plan, at least the internal part. Then I moved forward hiring a communications person and a community outreach person. There's this one position, but full-time. With where the school is at, this is a common enrollment scenario for a school that is your age, the age of TCGIS. The excitement of the newness of it is wearing off, and you're just kind of in that more mature stage. And so we need to, I think, configure the outreach a little bit with some messaging that helps families who didn't start the school, or are friends with people who started the school, help them understand, why would you send your child to an immersion school? Maybe they're not connected to German, maybe they are, but I think also connecting them to immersion. So we're going to be working with the messaging to kind of work on drawing a broader group in. We've already got a list of some communities in the area that we haven't done outreach to that we think would be interested in German immersion. And so there'll be a lot of targeted kind of marketing strategy that we're going to work on. I'm positive we're going to be having lots of ideas come from the the communications committee, and Paige will be there for that. But just so you know, it was hard really this summer to kind of turn this around, but we did everything we could to keep it from going anywhere different than what it is right there. And I think that worked, and that we're going to be moving forward very actively. And I've already started the wheels in motion to get that 589 back to 611.
We did a lot of proactive communication with kindergarten.
We did.
Didn't have a KA teacher. That could have been a moment of panic that sent a lot of families packing. We did not lose one single family.
That's really a good point. So we knew it was a weakness, a vulnerability, that we did not have a KA teacher in place on back to school night. So there were phone calls, communications. Elizabeth was communicating with them daily via email, taking phone calls. And Catherine Reich and I and the human resources director went down into the room and put all sorts of activities together, and we did bulletin boards. And so the KA teacher's very happy to have his bulletin boards done, but we got all that ready so that the room looked like it was ready. And then Catherine and Elizabeth and I all were down in there talking to the KA families, telling them we were on it, that we'd be communicating with them and notifying them as soon as there was a teacher in place. And I think that really helped, because we did not lose a single one of those students. So yeah. So really, the goal has been right now to keep that number where it's at if we can get more, great, and we do think we have 2 more coming. Next week, they're coming for a tour, and then we have another family coming in October from Switzerland. So that number may improve a little bit, and then we're gonna try not to get to the 4% loss that we know happens naturally, or the attrition that can happen by October 1st. We'll try to keep these methods we've been using up to this point. We'll try to keep those in motion moving forward. So that maybe that 4% attrition will just be more like a 1 or 2%. All right, so this is some of the prospective students that I knew about, and if you're wondering why families depart, that's in the second column. One was moving to a preferred school in 1st grade, another one, it's a family issue. In 3rd grade, we had one departing to a new school, one was another reason that they didn't say, and one said no reason at all. In 4th grade, we had 2 that left for academic fit, social concerns. And in 5th grade, they didn't give a reason. And in 7th grade, we have 1 coming in and 1 left to go to a preferred school with friends. And then in 8th grade, we have 1 coming. I think they're German speaking students, so. So there's some, hope on the horizon to get to 600 there. Maybe closer. So enrollment strategy, I went a little bit over that, where we hired the communications director. We added recruitment to the communication directors or communication coordinator position, community relations coordinator. And it's they're mostly, other than some front office work, mostly dedicated to communications, outreach, fundraising, really getting that message out there. The person that's hired has worked for Kinder Club here, Paige Yurkovic, and so a number of people already knew her. We had 25 applications for the position. We did 4 interviews, 3 of them spoke German. And we're really close on 2 of them, but one of them, when we asked for his preferences, he didn't return our call, so that made it easy to choose Paige. Yeah, it surprised us a little bit too, but we got ghosted a little bit on that one. We're gonna start working, we're already talking about recruitment events and outreach for the winter, including the open houses. And then I'm also gonna engage with a targeted marketing firm that has worked with some charter schools in the area that can find the families that might be most interested in our kind of education here. And then we can direct market to those families with phone calls and mailings. And last I worked with them, it was like a $4,000 investment, but it can be a huge return on investment, because generally they can, and I'm sure Kirsten, you've done this before, but they'll find the families and their addresses and including social media addresses, and we can then really reach out directly and get them to some of these events. And even if you get 2% of the families out there, that could mean 20, 30, 40 kids for us. So that's what I would like to work on. I've already got a phone call into the person to meet with them and get a number on how much it'll cost. The education of current and potential market about the importance of immersion. Because some people will say, well, why German? And we don't want that question asked. We want them to, we love to have people who love German, but we also want them to think it's not just about the German, it's also about the immersion, it's also about the whole child, it's also about the innovative education. So we want them thinking about, just because they're not German speaking or don't have German heritage doesn't mean they might not want to be here. So prospective also family education program alignment inventory, making sure that for the prospective families and the families that are here, like if we're losing families, for it's not a good fit. If that percentage is too high, we want to make sure that our programs are aligning with what our families thought they were getting when we were here with our marketing. So that's what that means, is we need to do some inventory in there to make sure our messaging and what families think they're getting when they come is what they're getting. We want to have integrity with what we do. So. Some of the key performance indicators, we have 84 days of cash on hand, it's about where we were at last year at the same time. The DSC ratio is projected to be 1.07 based on the approved budget. But that number came from Kelly, and she said that they don't have the FY23 ratio finalized because they're in the process of working on the audit. So, getting ready for the audit. So she said, be ready for that in the September meeting. Staff retention, we went over these numbers in, the spring, or I would guess June. We have 87% retention rate for total staff, 84 if you look at teachers. It's not necessarily a terrible rate, but I think we can see that go up a little bit if our tiered teacher supports are implemented proactively this year. I think if you have happy teachers, you have happy students and happy families. So that's why there's a little strategy there to, make sure teachers are feeling supported.
We didn't have any teachers. Right over this number, we lost one.
Yeah, we didn't have any teachers quit this summer. Yeah, nobody's quit since I went over these numbers in June. We've only added. Yeah.
How did that 84 compare to like local schools?
We've tried to find that number
hard
and it
to
doesn't
get.
exist.
Okay.
Yeah. Not all.
State has only done data on teachers in their first 5 years. That seems to be the data that they're concerned about.
They used to do a teacher supply and demand report every other year, and I
They
believe
did do one, but it's just teachers in the first 5 years.
they changed that. It used to be others, but yeah. And the retention rate nationally used to be, well, even locally in Minnesota, used to be 50% in the profession. So that actually went the wrong direction, and now it's under 50%. So teachers are not staying in the profession. And when they leave schools, they usually aren't leaving for another school, they're leaving the profession.
So may I ask,
Yeah.
How do we know that, this is going back a couple of slides. For example, for kindergarten this year, we're getting 56 new students. How do we know that this year is an aberration, or if this is potentially the new normal? And if, families that are choosing to go to other schools do we know which schools these are? And is this something that we can, I don't know, what are they doing differently?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and that is one of the other, I guess I didn't talk too much about this, but Nicole has upped her game on the exit interviews, and she's been very aggressive and, well, assertive, I should say, not aggressive, she's very polite. But she's been very assertive in trying to get the families to do an exit interview with her. And both in person, but also online, they can do more of an anonymized version of a response or an exit interview, but sometimes they'll talk to her. We can sometimes get those details, but not always. I don't think I've seen any consistency in which schools they're choosing right now. It's kind of all over the board, and not abnormal for a charter school to see kids leave people who go to charter schools are families that believe they have that it's good to choose a school for their kid, not just send them to the neighborhood school. So because they have that proclivity to choose, they're more likely to be choose another school if they don't like what they find. As opposed to the families who might go to the neighborhood school and they're not really into choosing their school, they just go wherever they're expected to go. So I just think we have a very active parent base here that takes a lot of responsibility in choosing for their child. And some families move their kids around a little bit more than others. I do think the trends need to be watched, and that's what we're trying to do, is collect as much information as we can to see if there's any trends there, and I will keep updating you guys on a monthly basis with those. The 56, is it an aberration? I don't know yet. That's why I'd like to do the market. That's why I want to do the aggressive communication plan this year. Do the outreach, do some things a little differently. A lot of the recruitment happens prior to May. And not, some of it can happen in July if you've got some momentum, but most of it happens in the spring, not the summer. So we'll see. In kindergarten, I think we want to do a lot of that in time for the lottery. So, which is in January, right? February, all right. Depends, some schools is January, some is February. So we don't know if it's an aberration. I do know that across the cities, kindergarten enrollment's down. School age population number is down. So there might be some trends we just have to get accustomed to and adjust accordingly.
I've invited Megan Dayton, previous board member and state demographer, to come and speak at our strategic planning session during the retreat to talk about state demographics and what school boards should keep in mind when planning. So I think it'll be really interesting.
Can I ask a quick question, kind of piggybacking off Wandy? Given our thin kindergarten class, it's kind of like teachers, right? We also have to invest in keeping these families here. So I know there's been some earlier conversations that happened last June, but just wondering if you guys are thinking about that too. How do we connect, especially our first and kindergarten grades, to our school community quickly so that they build those roots and decide to stay here? And I'm just wondering if that kind of go recruitment and retention, if you're thinking about that hand in hand.
We did think about that, and the kindergarten teachers, Stephanie and Liz, this was before Andrew joined, came up with a Schulentuta activity to bring the families in. Last year, you might remember the PTO made those and created that tradition for us, and then we just took it over this year. So there was already a fun activity where the kids could come up, hang out on the playground, parents could mingle and meet, and they made their little school cones on Monday and Tuesday before they got to school on Wednesday. So yeah, we're already thinking about things like that.
Right, yeah. So we'll try to, and that was part of why we're trying to communicate early and often with families, not just ones leaving, but the ones who are here. Try to help connect them in, and there'll be more intentional things that we're working on to do that 100%.
Kindergarten immersion specialist.
Oh, yeah, forgot. You want to talk about that?
It was in my staffing thing, but
Okay.
bringing Frau Vanessa on just to make sure that the kindergarten teachers are extra supported and that things go well in those classes.
I'll be honest, because I believe in honesty. We brought Frau Vanessa on 2 weeks before the start of the school because we didn't know if we could find a kindergarten teacher. She's not licensable, but we wanted somebody in that classroom who was going to be able to be consistent throughout the year. Because we don't want 56 to go to 54 or 52 or 51. And so we hired Frau Vanessa for that room, also as a way to encourage a teacher to come on board. And now we have the benefit of Frau Vanessa's here. And now she's gonna support all of the kindergarten teachers. Because we found a licensed teacher for the room 2 days before school started. And so now we get to use, have Frau Vanessa be there to help build that community and build that community up to hopefully be the ones who stay and stick with us. So it started out as a Band-Aid solution and turned into a real asset, I think, for our kindergarten teachers.
I just wanted to mention too, that parent council is planning a night,
Yeah.
what are they calling it?
It's like a parent panel night where they're inviting parents to ask questions of more veteran parents, people that are new to the community, who aren't sure about their routines and parent outreach
Great
night,
idea.
Yeah, so
Great, really great.
September 18th.
mhm.
I do think a huge asset of this community is how engaged the parents and the board are in welcoming families in. It's the fact they all got welcomed by the board to this meeting, not that, they came, but maybe they're online, maybe, but just really a lot of outreach is going on naturally, which is wonderful.
I have some data to follow up on your question about what's normal for teacher retention. I don't know that this is based on what's normal, but in our authorizer evaluation, 3.16, we're evaluated on our teacher retention. And so it's 4 different levels, whether we meet the standard, approaching standard, does not meet standard, or exceeding the standard. And there was a lot of negotiation in this, I'll say, when we were finalizing our agreement, because we just had to renew it last year. And we talked about how, we have some German teachers that come for a shorter period of time and then return back, and what's a unique situation. But ultimately, what we agreed on is that the standard is more than 85% of teachers remained at the school. So we're pretty close to that. And this is also better than historically 5 years ago. It was more like 20–25% sometimes. So back then we,
Attrition, 25%.
yeah,
75%.
and back then we set the goal of 15%. So it's nice to see that we're close to meeting that goal that we set. That was back in 2019.
So you went over, I'm giving you a little overview of the staff licensure. These are teachers on each kind of license, and there are 4 license levels. And tier 4 is your real classic old school license, maybe fully licensed in the traditional way. Tier 1, just to give you some perspective, would be anyone with a bachelor's degree that we bring in to teach, and they're only able to teach on that tier 1 license for a couple of years. Sometimes that's how we can get the native German speaking teachers here. But we have 37.25% of our teachers are on a tier 4 license. And I'll get you some perspective, I guess, maybe in the next couple of meetings. I'll try to bring in what that compares to with other schools. But I was pleasantly surprised to see, to run these numbers and see that many teachers in an immersion school, which is one of the hardest places to fit both the language skill and the full licensure together, that we have that many people on a real classic license. So we're happy to have other tiers to be able to accommodate teachers and our classrooms, but I just thought you might want to see the percentage. We do have a couple open positions for special education assistants, but that's it. Otherwise, we are, as was said earlier, fully staffed. We don't have any open positions in the rest of the school. I did make a few adjustments to front office. We assigned attendance to Nicole Chriselle, who's also doing enrollment. It's a real natural fit. So she'll be monitoring attendance and organizing attendance stats and kind of becoming an aficionado, shall we say, with respect to the Mars data. We do have Esther who works on that, but is it Noy? It is, sorry, Esther Noy. But we want to cross train a little bit so that, you know, should Esther be out a little while or Nicole out a little while, you have two people who know the Mars system. The Mars attendance is very important because that's what the state uses to decide how much funding we get. So we want to have really well-trained people tracking Mars or doing that data entry for us. Don't want to make any mistakes there. So that's why I took some time to do that in the front office. We're also trying to give some more time to Isabel, who took on the business management of accounts payable, accounts receivable, bill paying, things like that from the internal side of things. BKDV does a lot for us, but they're more of an accounting firm. We need to do some things internally with purchase processes and procurement and ordering, and there has to be some checks and balances on those things. And she needs some time to build those systems and reinforce those systems and pay attention to all the bill paying going on or purchase requests. So she's been given more time to do that and taken a little bit outside from she's still coordinating the front office, but has been given more time there. And we also brought Andrew Mangan from Kinder Club into the front office for lunchtime because that was in his job, just in their job description, and they've been knocking it out of the park. So Andrew knows the kids quite well, and it's a good time for Andrew to be in there and helping out. And then we added we're considering possibly bringing in some hourly help for end of the day, but we haven't 100% decided whether that's needed yet or not. And then we added a director of operations today. We did an internal posting for someone to be the director of operations. The school had that for many years and went through a lot of transitions last year, I know, between Ashley and then was it Leah? And Lisa. And then nobody, well, you didn't have the position filled, but you had Kim come in to do HR. So the team was looking for leadership, and you lost the executive director too in the spring. And so when I went in to work with the team, I could see they needed a team leader. And where I don't mind stepping into that gap, I felt like it didn't set the whole organization up for long-term success. It would just be another transition. And so the more I got to know some of the staff, the more I thought there's internal capacity here for someone to be that team leader. And that way, when you do transition to your long-term executive director, then you're going to have real balanced leadership teams that are ready to go on both the academic side and the operations side. That also will allow your executive director who comes in to be very strategic in their approach. And you also have, with that, you have a more stable three-legged stool of leadership. So should somebody be out, you still got two people to manage the workload for any reason. So there's just a lot of stability and sustainability that come with that. So I knew there were about 7 people who could probably do that work. Put an internal call out for applications. We got We knew we had about 4 interested. 2 of them told me they would love to, but wasn't the right time for them. 2 applied. We interviewed, Elizabeth and I interviewed them along with Kelly Gutierrez joined us. And we all determined that your director of operations will be Kim Reed, who is also your HR manager. She has experience in transportation, purchase processing, most of the areas that are on the team. So she used to do Isabel's job, so she's gonna be great for her as well, in terms of reinforcing and being a guide there. And so I just get to tell you today, she accepted the offer yesterday and she'll be your director of operations. So those are the changes. Yeah, she's very excited. We got a lot of excitement. I will say you have very strong operations team that was very protective of whoever is in that position. And they asked me a lot of questions today about how we set the position up in a way that will make it more successful for Kim than they felt it had been previously, for how overwhelmed maybe the previous DOOs had become. So I think we answered those questions quite well, and I will say Kim had also approached us about that earlier, before she ever applied. And we think we've built that position to be more sustainable. One of the key differences is your previous DOOs who had other duties had a lot of other duties. Well, not just HR. It was HR, transportation, and business ops. And those are all huge. In this case, it's just HR and DOO, or director of operations and team lead there. So you have very strong, we're building strong capacity in your business operations manager. You have transportation handled now with Jesse, because he's already handling that with technology. So that takes all of those things off of Kim's plate. Okay, so, and the goal is you've got your strategic, your leadership, and your implementation teams. Just to give you the visual on what that can look like. It's horizontal and vertical stability for you. This is just
a
a,
question.
yeah,
That's kind of a big question, but
huge.
could you, I know you won't have the answer to this right now, but could you back calculate what the school needs to have for enrollment to sustain this type
Sure.
of leadership
Yeah,
model?
we can.
Because we know this is more expensive than what the school has been running on. And I agree, it looks really, really promising.
Right. Yeah,
I
the
just want to
DOO
make sure that
addition.
we are set up
Yeah.
to be able to maintain this.
Yeah, the DOO position costs us about 15,000. But there are some things that we have done in the implementation level that, for the ops side, that does kind of offset some of that. But as we go through the budget, yeah, we're gonna have to make sure that we know what that number is of students to maintain. It also somewhat depends on your choice of the ED salary and et cetera. One of the arguments, or one of the thoughts I had as well is, I know a lot of schools looking for EDs right now. And what I wanted to do is set this up so that if you're not finding the right fit right away, that this is pretty strong laterally. That you don't, because if you, yeah, and it's more expensive to try to find an ED than it is to have a good deal and a good principal in place. But fair question, big question, we'll definitely do that, and, but I also think long-term, I just was seeing this as, something that had been hard for the school for the last 6 months. And, we'll make that budget work.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, so we have the community outreach who's gonna find students for us. And we have the director of operations, and then we have the kindergarten immersion assistant who we all went over. So those are the changes that we made. There are a few more changes that are, well, at least one's coming with some staffing, personal things if people move to different situations, and I'll go over those in September when we figured out what those are gonna look like. The organizational health survey, you can go to the next, do you want me to go through all the slides for that, or just to take key takeaways?
Just the takeaways.
Yeah, you go to the next one then. The positives for that, from that came the community, the colleagues, the students. Space that allows native speakers to have a little piece of home, enjoy things that PTO does for staff. Your organizational health survey, those respondents said they enjoy the looping and they like the consistency in watching students grow. You had about 38 responses this year. It wasn't a huge response. So I think we'll be looking to try to boost that response level next year. I think next steps on organizational health for next year, or for this year, I should say. The request for improvement was that teachers would like to be more involved in decision making. So our current proposed strategy is to restore staff council, or kind of revive it. We're working on it, trying to get that moving. But in the lieu of that, we have been trying to really connect with teachers and different through PD, giving them time to respond and do feedback in these task forces. So hopefully some of that naturally integrated work will be enough instead of one more thing or one more council to go to. They wanted a more cohesive, or the organization wants a more cohesive administration and leadership. They're worried about administrative turnover and ED burnout. So developing a multi-layered administrative team, which is experienced both laterally and horizontally, is one of those goals. Try to create that triangle that will help to prevent burnout. And then communication from leadership about big things like changes in administration was something that was requested as an improvement. So we're trying to develop regular internal communications prior, or a plan, and open. We're keeping our doors open and soliciting more feedback. And we're trying to communicate out these things on a pretty regular basis as best as we can. They want a more structure, or the organization wants a more structured and purposeful meeting agenda. So we're reducing the number of meetings, increasing the focus of the meetings, and coordinating area initiatives in terms of goals, work, and other task forces together. So you heard a little bit of that from Elizabeth. You want to talk a little bit about that? Because that was a very intentional move on our part.
Yeah, I think that the Monday email is intended to replace the benign stuff that would happen in a meeting. And so there's no reason to sit in front and read anything to anyone. So if we can get that communication out in an easier email format and use our meetings for moving strategic work forward, that's just gonna feel more meaningful. And those task forces are also loaded up with the feedback that we heard about wanting improvement in urban immersion, wanting standards aligned, wanting curriculum, wanting to make sure that they know what they're doing for teaching for SEL. And so those are all, they are led by teachers and admin together, switching the facilitation role, and the entire staff got together to think about what the goals of those groups were. And then the teams partnered off and created the goals from there.
They also, your organization asked that we utilize the talents of current staff as opposed to going outside of the organization. I think what we're working on is clarifying roles and responsibilities of non-teaching staff and trying to develop their capacity to provide them resources to grow and become experts in their areas, with the teachers too. So I don't feel like I had enough context to know what some of that request was for from the organizational health survey. Maybe a little more context.
Yeah, I think that when we bring people in and our teachers are feeling like, well, we're experts on immersion strategies, that's I think what we're wanting. So the German Immersion Task Force is working on PD that is specifically towards the mission of our school. And so using our teachers love learning from each other. Director Aberhard did a good PD session last year that was really well received by our teachers. And they're just wanting more of that. Our teachers have a wealth of knowledge and they're ready to share it with each other.
Which is, I think, pretty much what we did for PD this year. So it brought folks in, I didn't bring outside people in as much as we utilized the capacity of people here. The curriculum for all was a request for improvement, and we have things like the school-wide approach to social emotional development happening, and it's very intentional work being done the last 2 years to help teachers get ready for that and then to implement it. Next slide. That's it?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep, that's it.
so other questions about the start of the school year? Start of the school year.
Well, thank you for all that information. That was really great.
Figure. It is. It feels good already, even though we're all tired from 2 weeks of full time work. It's feeling good.
Good. All right, if there's no further questions, thank you for your report.
So we didn't really-
Director.
We didn't really talk about it, but the authorizers report, the evaluation.
Yeah.
But there was nothing glaring that, needs to be fixed right away. And I think the letter was really nice and a good summary of how it went. There are clearly a few areas for improvement, some of which we have no control over. But was there any additional thoughts on that from your guys' perspective?
Yeah, so in quick summary, the student learning program got that average of 3.42 out of 4, which is pretty good. And there weren't any huge takeaways from that. So we're continuing to do our due diligence on monitoring the academics. For St. Thomas, that authorizes us, they are recognizing that we do have a strong academic program, that looping was a big success. They're happy to see the move towards the social and emotional and behavioral learning because they see that as a support for the academic progress being made. That was the highest score we got of the main areas. The second highest was in the financial health, where we got a 3.25 out of 4. And they don't note any big deficiencies. They said there's a strong fund balance, a conservative budgeting approach, and an active finance committee. And then you have, in terms of it being well run, we got a 3.1 on average. They compliment the board on staying up to date, staying trained. Says the board is an example of organizational strength and support to the school. And And they think the focus on diversity inclusion as part of the strategic plan and partnership is well underway, and it's a good direction to go. And I think that's really the area they are hoping to see more growth. So I think where I was hoping to help the school build that into the improvement plan as with the marketing and the outreach and the community events that we're participating in. I think we'll probably look at some things too from the academic side. But in terms of the operations side, those are the areas I think where we could really work on the inclusion and finding more diversity to bring into the school. Anything else strike you, Lori, in the report?
No, I thought it was generally very fair and very positive. I was flattered that the board was given a 4 out of a maximum of 3 on one of the standards in knowing what our jobs and responsibilities are. So yeah,
That's right.
That's funny.
that was 3.6.
It's a very thorough board. Well deserving of those marks.
I do have one question from the evaluation, 3.2. The question was, do the school's disciplinary practices eliminate disparities as they relate to students of color? And there wasn't a rating because the information was not available. And that was surprising to me because I remember reviewing that data last year. But is that something we could pull together and look at next time?
Well, I know that we keep track of when we had been doing dismissals, we kept track of race and things like that. So I'm not, there should have been some data.
I'll follow up on it, but the cell size may be too small for us to analyze in public.
Mhm.
And
Like
that
she
might
said.
be why it's here, not in our report.
Mhm.
But we'll follow up and see if that's the reason. If not, then we'll bring it forward. And
That's
if the
good.
cell size is under 9, generally, it's not appropriate to do that kind of disaggregation.
Mhm.
Because this isn't just overall school behavior, this is those functions.
Mhm. Okay. I noticed over the summer that we did get the application translated into Somali. So thank you for that. That was on the diversity and belonging committee list. So are there plans to do other languages, do you know?
Not that, well, we can look into it. But not
That's,
specifically.
yeah.
I curiously, any thoughts on what the next best language would be?
Spanish.
Spanish and Hmong.
Sorry, no.
Yeah, that's one of 4 criteria that we're evaluated on for diversity is marketing outreach targets, socioeconomically and racially diverse populations, which include having materials available in multiple languages.
Maybe our state demographic.
I know MDH publishes the most commonly spoken languages for translation of, for example, Medicaid materials. So maybe I'm sure there's a statistic somewhere.
Yeah, I know kind of that research. I was just wondering if there's something in this neighborhood specifically that I think the Hmong is probably the closest. This area. I will say there with respect to the question about attracting kind of a wider array of socioeconomic status. We've made a couple of decisions about busing already to ensure that the busing is making it into neighborhoods equally that would be efficient for families that are from neighborhoods that aren't as socioeconomically advantaged.
That's
And I
something
think
that we've been pushing for a
we
couple
need to
years.
do a little more analysis on that.
So that's great to hear.
We have, I think we need to put a bus line in one area that, right now we've got a van too. So we'll be doing a little more looking at that this year based on some conversations Jesse and I have already had.
Regarding the application, of course, they can be in more languages, but could there be, I don't know, have we considered in-house application? Where people don't have to fill out applications, but when we're doing outreach, they can just sit down, fill it out right there.
Yes, I've actually coordinated those before and they can be very effective and I think it's a great suggestion.
For bringing up the authorizer report. All right. There's no further questions. We will call a recess. It's 8:10. I think we will meet in 15 minutes.
Thank you. Maybe we shouldn't have done. That's why,
Huh? No, Richard Hyde gave it to me like 2 meetings ago and it's awesome.
And,
Yeah, you need like a lot. So like.
Okay. Keep making improvements.
Yeah, but I saw it in the.
I haven't calculated yet, but I'm pretty sure. Yeah, that was a really big class that signed up too.
Okay, are we back online? All right, I'm calling this meeting back to order. Next on the agenda is board committee reports. The first one is the finance and facilities. Our treasurer is not here tonight, so please just read the report. Were there any questions on the finance committee notes? Okay, if not, we'll move on to governance and leadership development. Director
Yes, that's
Hartman?
me. So I won't go over what we did at the last meeting we had on August, was it 16th? We had a small but productive, small attendance and productive meeting. And I was gonna announce when the meetings are, but now I've forgotten, is it third Monday? They're on the school calendar. I'll put a plug for anybody who's interested in looking at policies and helping out with the work that our committee does. We did make a decision, which is reflected in the minutes, to extend the meetings by another 30 minutes. So there will be a 90-minute meeting, just because we always have too much work and we need to make sure that we're able to get through it. Speaking of which, we have five policies to recommend to the board for approval tonight. They're listed in the minutes. And so now would I just make a motion to approve them? So I will make a motion to have the board approve policy 412, expense reimbursement, policy 902, use of school district facilities and equipment, policy 214 on out-of-state travel by board members, policy 430, dignity at work, and a brand new policy that is number 516.5 on overdose medication, which is a newly required policy.
Thank you for the motion, Director Hartman. Is there a second?
second.
Thank you, Director Alberts. Discussion on the policies.
I have one question on the building usage or use of school district facilities and equipment. What's, I know there's some restrictions on like what we can and cannot use our building for in terms of rent because of the way charter schools are structured and lease aid, but this made it sound like there weren't any restrictions. Are they two separate things? Are they two separate policies? I don't want to get in the weeds, but I was just curious.
Yeah, so they're not, my understanding is, and Julie, you can also, or Director Alcott, to weigh in on this, is that it's not so much it's a limitation, but when we've discussed this in the past, in terms of could it be a fundraising vehicle? The answer to that is no, because there is, as I understand it, pretty much a direct offset against lease aid if we try to charge a rent, for example, a rental amount for use of the space, that will get reported and then kind of offset in the lease aid report. So we wouldn't make any incremental money. We could charge for things that are direct overhead, like cleaning. If we need a person to be standing there, the time for that person during the period of time it's being used for a non-school thing. So that wouldn't be a limitation that would need to be reflected in the policy.
Got it.
Yeah.
Any other questions? All right, all those in favor of approving the policies as listed by Director Hartman, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Thank you for all the work that you two have been doing on the governance development. Okay. Director Albers, I was wondering if you could give a verbal update
Yeah,
on the hiring committee.
yeah, it's been quite the process to kind of get started on this. We've been looking at specific firms that were kind of brought before the hiring committee, which is composed of a few board members at this point. And they were unfortunately the initial search, they were full. They weren't able to take on our request. And so we're still looking for a firm at this point. We have a few other leads based off of the initial leads that I still have not heard back from and I'm going to follow up on. And then the request for proposal has been created. It's up on the school website. It's also something that we're looking to put out on different channels. We were attempting to put it on LinkedIn and it wasn't linking properly. So we need to figure out how to get that, and maybe that would be a great thing to help with the communications and outreach. I don't know the official title or remember it anymore, but the new hire that was approved this week on staff and the person that can help with social media and things like that too. Paige. I was like, I don't remember her title.
She's very good at social media.
Yes. And then also using just other resources that we've collected from former board member Megan Dayton, who has experience in this area as well. We're hoping to have a deadline for the request for proposal so that we can get started on a more robust timeline for the rest of the year in regards to getting applicants and hopefully interviewing. So that's kind of the overview gist of all of it.
Mhm. All right, thank you for the update.
Yeah.
Are there any questions?
I had a quick question.
Mhm.
And maybe I'm not remembering things correctly. When we were looking for the interim director, I think there were a list of requirements or that the board reviewed. Is there such a list for the actual? And
Yeah.
have we reviewed it or?
So in the request for proposals, there's a whole outline of what we're looking for in the firm. And then once we use that firm, we'll be able to kind of rework what we had hoped for with the interim kind of priorities to kind of help us from that point. But we need a firm to work with first before we can get back into the more nitty-gritty details of what we're looking for in a permanent director. So hopefully, I think a lot of them will stay within a certain amount the same. Obviously, this is a permanent position, so we're looking more at long-term things that we want in a director versus for an interim position, more of the short term and helping. We're hoping that some of the candidates that had applied initially for the interim position may reach out again once we have the the permanent position posted with the firm. So at this point, the ones that had submitted requests to us or applications for the interim position have been told that position is no longer available. And that was, of course, to reduce the amount of transitions between directors as we look for a more permanent solution. So I hope that answers it.
Yeah, thank you.
So the recruiting firm will help us lead the community engagement portion, which will be, gathering feedback from all different stakeholders on what they see as priorities in the new leader.
Okay.
So that will help inform what we determine to be the new profile of who we're looking for.
Sure.
Okay. Any other questions for the hiring committee? All right, thank you, Director Albers. Next, some items from the executive committee. We have an agenda for the board retreat that's in the packet. And I'd like to ask for board approval of the board retreat agenda. So I'll make a motion to approve the board retreat agenda for September 9th. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Director Hartman. Let's open it up for discussion. So I know this is the day of the Oktoberfest at the GAI. And board members have been asked to help represent TCIGS at the table. So we could do that Friday evening, we could do that Saturday evening. But this would take our time during the day. And I know Director Kritzinga is working at the GAI, so he let me know today that he won't be able to make it. Are there other dates that are possible? I think we were trying to get this scheduled pretty early in the year to.
I checked my schedule and the only Saturday available is 2 days from now, for the day, and otherwise nothing until mid-October. So it's really bad.
Okay.
So don't change the date because of that.
Okay. Busy guy.
You know.
Okay, so it sounds like the date is fine regarding the agenda. As I mentioned earlier, we have the state demographer Megan Dayton coming to talk about trends in demographics and how it's impacting schools. And then we'll transition to updating the strategic plan. So as you'll recall, we had a strategic plan task force last year. Made up of 4 board members, and we made it through most of the strategic plan and made edits, and I've linked that in the agenda for the board retreat. So I was hoping we could go through those edits and as a board decide if that's what we want to say or not, and then make it through the rest of the milestones that we didn't get a chance to go through in detail. Unreasonable? All right, all those in favor of approving the board retreat agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, we have in our bylaws that the board approves the board liaisons. We have 3 liaisons, administrative, staff, and parent. And I'm proposing that I would be the administrative liaison as the board chair. And Lindsay Smaka would be the parent liaison to interface with parent council. And Richard Hyde would be the staff liaison. I'll make a motion for those liaisons to be approved. For a second.
Okay.
Thank you, Director Aberhard. Discussion on the liaisons. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Thank you. At the last board meeting, I announced new academic officer position, which is Director Albers. And so I've written a job description for that just to add clarity. And I think it's key that this officer would be part of the executive committee because the charter of the executive committee is to oversee the many things, but wellness committee is on there, curriculum advisory committee, and the special education advisory committee. And so having this person that can focus their time to liaison with those committees, especially with an education background, I think will be really key. So I'd like to approve the description. And Director Hartman brought to my attention that in our bylaws, we have defined who can be a member of the executive committee. And it's board chair, vice chair, treasurer, secretary. And so to add an officer to that, I think we need an amendment to the bylaws. Is that right?
Correct.
So I'd like to ask the governance committee to take that on and propose edits that we could approve at the next board meeting.
Yeah, and so as a suggestion, I think what we could do is approve, if we're looking to approve this officer position description, we could approve it minus the last sentence, and then at the next board meeting, discuss an amendment to the bylaws that would stipulate that the academic officer is part of the executive committee, so that would happen without any further approvals or action.
Mhm. So that would happen after the bylaws are changed. Okay.
Correct.
Sounds like a reasonable solution.
Mhm.
Thank you. I'll make a motion to approve the academic officer position minus the last sentence regarding executive committee. Is
You
there
mean,
a second? Yeah.
you mean the description of the position?
What did I say?
Okay, the position, but okay.
So I'd like to approve the description of the position.
Second.
Thank you, Director Hartman. Is there discussion on this? All right. I'll ask for unanimous consent this time. Any objections? Motion carries. Thank you. All right, and for the bylaws, the board chair appoints the committee chairs. And I don't have this in front of me, so I'll do it by memory. Lindsay Smaka is the Communication and Outreach Committee Chair. Thank you for taking that on. Lori Hartman is the Governance and Development Committee Chair. Kirsten Reich is the Fundraising and Development Chair. Kevin Aberhard is the Diversity and Belonging Chair. Richard Hyde is the Finance Chair. Emily Albers is the Hiring Committee Chair. And I chair the Executive Committee and the Committee of the Whole. All right, thank you all for taking on those responsibilities. I know it's a lot of work to keep a committee going, but we've always been really successful, so thank you. Okay, I wanted to bring up a couple items for new business. The first is I would like to put out the idea of having board student representatives on the board. This is following a model that I've seen with Minneapolis Public Schools, and I've been really impressed with the students that have sat on the board. They serve as ex officio members, so they're non-voting members, but they bring a student perspective to the board. I was thinking that we would look to alumni to serve in this role. So on Minneapolis Public School Board, they look for sophomores or juniors. And I thought we could look to our alumni as they're a little older and maybe handle more of this responsibility. But still are fresh enough that they remember how students are feeling at TCGIS. And I do have a description I put together, which I can share on my screen. Okay. So we would open up applications to this at a certain date. And here's the description that the goal of the student representative is to provide insight from a student lens and to support and enhance the board's understanding of the student issues and how students experience their education. I'm proposing that to expand student voice and to share the responsibility of students serving in an adult space such as the board, that we could select 2 students to have this role. They could both be, they wouldn't share the role, they would both be student representatives that would attend every meeting if they are able to. And as I mentioned, they'd be ex officio members. Students would be recognized in board discussions in the same manner as directors. And so we have to come up with an application if we decide to do this. Here's some tips for applying. And eligibility and responsibilities. As I mentioned, I thought we could look at graduates. I put in here that I think it would be preferable to have someone that participated in the K-8 program, so that they have experience at all the different grades. I'm open to other opinions there if that's necessary or not. And then time commitment, we would ask them to commit to 1-year term of being on the board. We'd ask them to come to our committee of the whole meetings, and the board meetings, so twice a month. And we would have them do some virtual or in-person board training. We would conduct interviews and go from there. So this is just new business. I wanted to put it out there for us to consider. And I think we could vote on it next month if we decide to go forward. Are there thoughts on this?
Would that also require change of bylaws?
That's a good question.
I think that might be a bigger discussion about whether they're actual board members and have the same fiduciary duties to the school, and in that role, we can technically have minors on the board, just not a majority. We have to have a majority of adults on the board. But we maybe have to think about how that interfaces with our teacher majority numbers, or parent majority numbers, because we have to have a majority of parents on the board. So I think there are a bunch of details to think about. And what specific role are formally on the board. And ex officio just means they're on, somebody's on by virtue of their job description. So Karen is an ex officio non-voting board member. So these wouldn't technically be ex officio. They would be board appointed non-voting members. And that's the part that might require an amendment to the bylaws if the board, because the board, I don't think the board can appoint board members unless there's a vacancy on the board. So we would have to give the board authority to not take it to the parents, right? Not take it to the members for the vote. So there are a lot of moving parts here, but I think it will be an interesting conversation.
Mm-hmm. So as far as the parent majority, I've never included the ex officio in that number.
Oh, okay.
So I think,
Is it just voting members? Maybe it's just
Yeah.
voting members.
I think that would be something to definitely look into, though, to make sure.
Minneapolis Public Schools describes them as ex officio members. So whatever. But we can definitely fine
Well, we
tune
won't
this. And
I don't know if we're discussing the details now.
Yeah.
I love the idea. The only thing I would maybe challenge is, I would say like, it should be someone who's an 8th grader who's at the school as opposed to someone who's gone from here.
mhm,
So, because you want them to speak for the current student body, and the students that pay attention to this may say that that person is not even here. How's he or she, a representative of us? And I think that would be the only maybe adjustment I would make.
mhm.
I'm curious to just, my child is in elementary school still, but for those who have older children, is there a student government for TCGIS, whereby
There's a student council.
there's a student council. Is this body elected by all the students? I'm saying
Middle school students.
middle school students. Has there been any kind of student council liaison to the board or any kind of role whereby that council interfaces with the board? And could that also be alongside or somehow sort of thinking about Abner's feedback, part of the conversation? And how we're thinking about student voice coming into this space?
Is it possible that the student council president could be ex officio by position?
That's kind of what I'm wondering.
I think that's a great idea.
And sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, but I also at the same time see the value of having an alum. So maybe it's about having student council president who's a current voice, and then also maybe a recent alum.
Maybe if it's two, right?
Maybe it's two,
That could work.
Director Abraham?
And that's actually how it's done in Austria. I don't know about Germany. I guess it's similar. The whole board structure is a little different, but how it's done in Austria is that you have parent representatives on the board, you have teacher representatives on the board, administration, and students as well, like the student council president and the vice president are part of that body.
Awesome, thank you.
So how would that work then if the person is elected by the student body or by the middle school students? Would we still go through an interview process then? Or if the election through the election, somebody is appointed already?
I mean, I can
Probably, go ahead.
speak to some of it as the former advisory leader for that group. It's typically they're voted on by their advisory peers, and then from there, what I've done is within the council, I had them either vote for one specific president, or depending on the year, of course, I had most of the COVID years, it was the 8th graders in general. So they kind of shared the responsibilities of leading the meetings. They shared the responsibilities of helping plan things, helping the younger students understand a lot of those parts. They know, they're supposed to know what they are signing up for. So when they're being elected, they're understanding, as you know, 5th graders, they're joining to get experience and be on the council and represent their advisory. And then as they get older, they realize, there can be some leadership opportunities within that too.
Is there any teacher input for the election to kind of minimize the popularity contests that can arise from this type of thing?
We always had them make slides or something like that to kind of convince, but I would say that the input on that is very minimal. I think it starts off more so maybe in the younger grades as a popularity contest, and then they very quickly realize, wow, I did not mean to maybe do that. Obviously not all the cases obviously that we see, but I think there are moments too where they kind of are like, oh, what did I sign up for? I did not mean to sign up for that. I thought I'd be, I don't know, getting chocolate milk into the cafeteria, and the things that they're more concerned about are the internal facing things. So I think by the time they're in the older grades, they kind of have realized this process is not only just about being on the council as a popularity contest, but also creating some things that they'd like to do. And they work with Principal Zink-Penning to really bring forth ideas that have, clearly been great in the last year or so since the pandemic has subsided. So
Yeah, and I would add, the more meaningful the position is, the more responsible students who will have run for that. And I mean, every election's a popularity contest.
Mhm. I know, yeah,
I mean,
That's
look at
okay.
how many popular people are.
I just think with this amount of responsibility, it might be good to add some teacher vote to, and to kind of ensure that the student has enough maturity.
Like a letter of recommendation.
Yeah.
maybe, Yeah.
You know, that's been done in athletics. They get letters of recommendation in order to be captains of their teams as eighth graders. So,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
it has weight and merit to it.
So, a couple of things. I also think it's a great idea because I think we absolutely have a blind spot in terms of what the student impression is about TCIGS, the teachers and all of that. Given that, so I do support the idea of council president being automatically, because it removes the interviewing process. And I'll just say, maybe we can discuss it, maybe we can identify it, but at this point, I don't know we have a true tested method to identify the best representative. So I'm not sure how we would interview and identify that. And then the other point I wanted to make was maybe the commitment requirement can be a little bit relaxed because we're asking for their help, and then it might be difficult to say, we want you to help us, but this is what you have to do. Because I think the commitment, even for an adult, is not small.
Not even here, and
very diplomatic.
Diplomatically stated.
another model, and granted, this is not K-8 or K-12, but at an institution where I work, there's the student observer who sits in on the Board of Regents meetings. Certain parts of them, like when the board goes into closed session, the student step out, but they serve as a kind of liaison. So they're observing the meeting, they speak and present at the meetings, but their role really is to be a liaison, to be able to communicate to the board student voice, and then also at the same time return to the students and talk about pieces that are particularly important to the students that come out of board conversations. So, I mean, that could be a possibility. I mean, we are usually here at 9:30, sometimes 10, 11 o'clock at night on a school night, Wednesday and Thursday night. So I would worry about a young person doing that twice in a month, potentially. So I wonder if that's maybe another model for sort of thinking through a kind of role that would be manageable.
I like that idea of the liaison, kind of like a staff liaison, parent liaison, maybe a student liaison. It seems I had some of the same concerns about length of meetings, late nights, big commitment, just given all the other things that kids have going on. To really make it still feel weighty and still feel really important, because it is, but maybe a little bit more realistic, given the age of the students that we're talking about.
Yeah, and I think that's important. I was just doing some Googling on it, and it appears to be very, very common. Like most of what I'm seeing through Google is that there is a student representative. Minneapolis made the news because they added a second student to their board. But these are also high school sophomores and juniors. So the idea of getting maybe an alum who's that much out is maturity wise a better fit for being somebody serving on the board. Because the Minneapolis site does mention you're expected to be at the board meetings, which routinely go until 10 p.m. and go to their equivalent of committee of the whole and these other things. Also, interestingly, there's a Minnesota School Boards Association scholarship for a student school board member every year. The school board has to be a member of the MSBA. So this is eye-opening to me that this is such a common practice, but again, more at the high school level than what we have.
I mean, I understand that we are required to be in person, but that person have to be required also to be here in person, or could that person Zoom it? To kind of like loosen that.
Yeah, I wonder if ex officio could be,
The
Just
ex
virtual.
officios are, yeah, they can Zoom
yeah,
as much as they want.
a good point.
Mhm.
Could be in their jammies.
So, yeah, it's a good job.
They could be in their-
Well, at least it removes the, like if you have an eighth grader, cannot drive home at night, needs to be picked up, all these kind of
Right,
things, like 1.5 hours. So
Yeah.
meeting is over and it is over.
Good idea.
Just another consideration about maturity. There's pretty weighty topics that are discussed in terms of staffing, financials, things like that. And I just think it's important for us to consider that maturity level of somebody hearing some of those conversations as well for, potentially people that they are interacting with on a daily basis in terms of their education. So obviously these are public meetings, so they can always log on, but
Well,
So the MSBA has some guidelines on what they, so this was mandated in the early nineties. You had to have a student on the board, and then 2 years later, they repealed it. I read this stuff quickly.
That's a little
So-
worrisome.
Yeah, and then they reinstituted something that said you can have one if you want, or they suggested something that was gonna say. Anyway, it doesn't matter, but MSBA has some guidelines that I can't tell how old they are, but one of the things it specifically says is it would almost never be appropriate for the student representative to be in the closed sessions of a board
Yeah.
meeting.
That makes sense.
So I think there are a lot of considerations, and we don't have to reinvent the wheel, apparently, thinking about some of this.
The ex officio is sounding better and better.
Mhm. And I have to say, listening to the Minneapolis Public School Board meetings, those students ask amazing questions. Like I've been blown away, and they're even at their retreats and just, they ask adult questions and then they get adult answers, and it's been really impressive. Have you ever dealt with a board that had student representatives, Karen?
Not in the charter schools I work with, no,
Okay,
but in Bloomington, I'm pretty sure we did.
all right, so I'll put this on the agenda for committee of the whole, and we can discuss it more. I'll make some of the edits that we talked about. And we'll get it figured out. The second new item is I just wanted to ask all the committee chairs to take a look at the committee charters from last year and update them for this year. We can reference the strategic plan for what our milestones are at the moment. And try to pick out the ones that relate to your committee. And then the board approves the committee charters, so I'd like to get those approved at the September meeting. Okay, does anyone else have new business? Okay. Hearing none. Without objection, I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everybody.